Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Mekanicast episode. Today we'll be talking in English since my guest is none other than, and I've rehearsed this a bit, Ramnarayan Venkatesan. If that doesn't ring a bell, you'll probably know him from titles These Savage Shores, Swamp Thing, Blue and Green, Justice League Dark, and many, many more as award-winning comic book author Ram V. Hi, Ram.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for finding some time to talk with me. It's been, well, I've been having this comic book store now for the last 7 years, and your name is becoming more and more famous. Your career is now like what, a decade old, something like that, or how long have you been in the
half a decade?
Really?
Yeah, I started. My first book came out in 2016.
Oh, really?
Self-published book called Black Mamba. Yeah.
Okay. Are you living the dream? Did it go fast for you or not?
I mean, yeah, it did go fast for me. Am I living the dream? I mean, yes, in the sense that I just get to write. I like writing. I like telling stories. So as long as I can keep doing that and not worry about my next paycheck and stuff like that, then yeah, I am absolutely living the dream.
So there's no pressure on you, or is there a constant pressure?
I mean, there's no external pressure on me, but I also think that creatively there's always an internal pressure, and you kind of need that.
Yeah, of course. Otherwise you, I think, more and more of your stories would fall flat if you don't feel a pressure that you have to bring out good stuff. Sorry, this is it's the first time that I'm talking to actually an international artist, so it's quite nervous for this.
I've read your English is very good, no problem.
Thank you. Yeah, well, half of the comic book store is English, so I read in English, but it's always another thing to speak in the language.
Yeah, of course.
These days are also pretty busy for you because next week for us in Belgium, Venom is coming out.
Yes.
While we were talking about pressure, was it hard to follow up on a guy like Donny Cates, or did you already have some ideas for the character?
I mean, not really. It's never been hard for me to follow anyone because I just don't think of when I think of Venom, I'm thinking about story, I'm thinking about ideas, I'm thinking about concepts. I don't think about who wrote before me. I don't think about who will write after me. And it was the same thing. I suppose the only time I have ever felt kind of intimidated by doing this was my very first story that I wrote for DC. It was a Batman short story, and I was just writing in, and I was putting in the script, Batman does this.
Yeah.
And I just had to pause for a second. I was like, wait, I'm writing Batman. That's pretty cool. Right. But once I got past that, it has never been a case, whether it's following Donnie's great run on Venom, or whether it's writing a character like Swamp Thing that has been written by some of the greatest writers in comics history.
Yeah, but I think the difference is for what you did with Swamp Thing, you made it your congratulations, by the way, because that also has gotten a second season, or how do they call it?
Yeah.
You did your own thing with it. You created actually a new character who became the Swamp Thing. Won't tell too much about it. But the status quo was actually more or less, how do I say this in English? There wasn't exactly a new status quo for Swamp Thing. You could start at any point you would like, while for Venom, you have given something and you had to do your thing with it. Was that hard, or you already had ideas?
I think there's actually, I didn't already have ideas, but I think part of working in comics, like the real joy of working in comics, is being able to pick up from where someone left off. Yeah, sure. Obviously, the other side of it is to take a character that no one's touched in a really long time and do a completely new take on it.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of work in comics tends to be stuff that is ongoing, stuff that someone else has written. And I think there's real joy in going like, okay, this is where the previous team left off. what can I do that is still new, but still works, still part of the same tapestry that the previous team was weaving, if you will.
And also for Venom, you're a team of 3. You're doing it a lot. You're writing it alongside with Al Ewing, and Brian Hitch is drawing. Does everybody have? Yeah, of course. For Brian Hitch, it's quite obvious that he draws the thing. But how is how is everybody's part in that story? Do you go back and forth all the time, or does everybody have like their own?
I mean,
chapters?
when we're writing the scripts, we tend to have like a weekly call. And Al and I, even though we are writing our own scripts, because the first issue is written by both of us. But I'm writing issues 2, 3, 4, and then Al's writing 5, and then I'm writing 6, 7, and Al's writing 8, 9, 10. You know, because there's going to be that sort of back and forth where we each get sustained amount of time to write these issues with these characters. Al's writing the Eddie Brock Venom. I'm writing the Dylan Brock Venom. The really interesting part is whatever happens in the Dylan Brock story affects whatever happens in the Eddie Brock story, and then whatever happens in the Eddie Brock story affects what happens here. And in reading both things, I think readers will start putting together the mystery of what's going on. You know.
Yeah, that's always cool if there's like a bigger picture behind the two stories themselves. That's really nice. And how was it to do that on a moment when there's also a new movie coming out? Because isn't that also, sorry to put it into the word pressure again, but did you see the movie yet, or did you totally? No.
I tend to not watch too many of the superhero movies. I think some of them were really well done, and then some of them I feel like they don't get why the comics are great, what makes the comics wonderful. So I watch them every now and then, but I'm not particularly looking at them and in any way sort of concerned about what I'm doing with the story compared to that, because I think these characters are wonderful and great because people came in onto these characters when they were not famous and they were not, nobody was paying attention, and then somebody started doing something really cool. Just like Donnie did with Venom. And so I think that's the real joy of writing these characters. So I don't feel pressure from any source at all. If anything, the only pressure there is I guess I want people like Al and Donnie to go, oh, okay, this is really cool. I like working with Ron. And so the pressure is more about like working with your peers rather than anything else. If that makes sense.
And I suppose you also read comics yourself. And that makes you like the feeling that you have with your audience probably more face to face, instead of like if you have to watch the movies and you have to think of those audiences. They don't understand comics all that well.
And also like I don't think of audiences at all.
There we go.
Because I think, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way at all. I just think that writing is a very internal process. It's about what I want to do, and then once it's done, then I'm like, oh man, I hope everybody likes it. But when I'm writing, I'm not really thinking about anyone else other than me.
How does your writing process work? Are you in your head working all the time, or do you really have a schedule where you can turn it on or turn it off again?
I can't turn it off.
Really?
I have a lot of problems turning off my head. I lose a lot of sleep because of that reason. Like even if I go to bed, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to bed at 12. I'll just be in bed thinking about story till like 3:30 in the morning, and I'll be like, oh my god, it's 3:30, I haven't fallen asleep yet.
I can imagine, because we hoped we could do this 2 weeks ago, but you were sick, and I was really thinking, would he still be working even when he's sick? Were you working, or were you still in the progress of thinking about, oh, maybe I can do that or can do this?
I mean, things slowed down a little bit, but yeah, I was still working. I still got
Yeah,
a script due tomorrow, and then day after I leave for Thought Bubble. But
yeah.
I still have to work on the days when I'm at Thought Bubble because I have to get another script out by Monday. So
Damn. You also next week for us then, Radio Apocalypse is coming out, the first issue.
yes.
Do you do these things while we're working, while we're talking about how you work? Can you keep these things separately? Yeah, of course, it's something completely different. But once in a while, if you have an idea, can you categorize it for which storyline you're going to use it? Because if I'm also correct, I'm going to name them all in a few weeks. I think it's under your name, Silver Corners short stories coming out.
Yeah.
And for us, the trade paperback of The Many Deaths of Layla Starr is coming out.
Yeah.
So you have all these stories, and you're probably writing other stories which we haven't heard of yet. Can you keep them separately? Is there one day you do this and one day you do that, or do you do everything at the same time?
I try not to do two different stories on the same day. But it's not very hard to separate the ideas because each story is a little bit different. They work differently. They are preoccupied with different things. But also, I don't think there's necessarily a harm in larger ideas being the same across multiple titles. You know, like as a human being, my mind is always like occupied with, with something greater. Maybe I'm thinking about the existential questions of death. Maybe I'm thinking about what is beauty. Maybe I'm thinking about what is friendship, and those kind of things. You can explore across multiple stories without it feeling like you wrote the same story. If that makes sense. Yeah,
that totally makes sense. I think it also, as you said, it helps that it are also different genres of stories that you're doing. For instance, for those who don't know, next week, Radio Apocalypse, I've already had the fortune to reading the first issue because retailers get those. That's a post-apocalyptic thing. The Many Deaths of Layla Starr is about actually, that's hard to well, I've read the first few issues and I'm waiting for the trade to read it in one whole. That's about more Indian culture and Indian gods and death and how you think about reincarnation and death and such, if I'm correct. Or
yes, it is
totally telling this wrong.
But it's also just like urban fantasy about life in Mumbai, life in India, and how we grapple with death through the various stages of our lives. So yes, there are gods. Yes, there are there's immortality and reincarnation and all of that. But on a basic level, it's just a story about how we as human beings across cultures sometimes contend with the idea of death. Yeah, I love the fact that you for us who don't necessarily understand everything of that culture, that you like portrayed in a really easy digestible way, that we get a very good view about all different kinds of gods that you know of, and especially that you portray them as a big office or something like that. That was a great way to portray them. I mean, I've always felt like there's been this odd sense of bureaucracy around Indian religion in a lot of ways. So I just felt like, oh well, what if all religion was actually a bureaucracy, and there's like a really annoying boss sitting on top, and there's a secretary who's always trying to suck up to him. So it's kind of like Indian gods, but in an episode of The Office, Yeah.
It works really well with the artwork of Felipe Andrade. That makes it a really down-to-earth kind of feel, while there's like deities walking around and such. So that makes it really
and he has a lot of joy and lightheartedness in his style, and I think taking a subject that is very serious like death and then presenting in this very lighthearted way, I think that the book really needed that. I don't think the book would have been successful without that. So
true. That's something we have to, for those who don't read single issues, and there aren't that many here in Belgium, by the way. I have like 200 people in the shop who read single issues, but the main story people who read comics read them in trade paperbacks. So we've got that looking forward to in December, if I'm correct.
Yep.
Something like that. But next week, for those who read single issues, there will also be Radio Apocalypse. That's a post-apocalyptic story. I read the first issue, and they say it's something like Good Morning Vietnam and The Walking Dead. And it also reminds, yeah, I don't know if you ever heard about the comic Gung Ho.
No, I haven't.
The feel of that comic is also a bit of the same thing.
Right.
It's about also post-apocalyptic, living inside of these camps which are protected against of the outside world, and there are certain creatures lurking around.
Right.
This is something a bit of the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to use that familiar genre, right? It's also the Fallout game, right? So you live in these like communities, they're all protected against the outside world. The outside world is crazy.
Yeah.
But I wanted to take that structure and yes, all those familiar tropes, and then go, yeah, but we're not going to look at any of that. We're going to look at a radio station.
Yeah.
And in that, I guess what I wanted to do is, I don't know if you've ever seen this film called The Boat That Rocked.
No.
It's about pirate radio in the UK, where they were transmitting illegal radio waves on a boat out on the river. So people could still get the radio broadcast, but they weren't legally required to do anything because there were no laws about radio broadcasting from the sea, from the water. And so I just like the idea of this kind of subversive broadcasting music out into the unknown. And Anand and I actually thought about this idea back in 2017.
Anand is for those who don't know, he's the artist, huh? Yeah,
yes.
you work with him quite a while sometimes, if I'm
correct. We did Blue and Green together.
Sure.
He won an Eisner for that.
Yeah.
And then we did Graffiti's Wall together. He's doing a DC story with me in Batman Urban Legends.
All those things,
yeah. So no, we've been longtime collaborators, but before we did any of those things, we thought of this idea.
Oh, really?
And then we never worked on it. And then last year, year before last, when the pandemic hit, the lockdown happened, and it was really distressing. And then people would come out on their balcony and they would play music for all of their neighbors to hear. And then people in Europe started singing opera in the morning, so you could hear them. And there is something very fundamentally human about using music in the bleak times.
Yeah, true.
To form this connection between strangers. And that's what I kind of wanted to tap into. One of my favorite novels is this book called The Cellist of Sarajevo. And again, it's that idea of music being very important when everything else is falling apart. So because we wanted to do that, and then the idea for this whole thing came up when I was collecting music to put on an audio cassette when I was much younger.
Yeah.
And I once thought to myself, if the world were going to end in 2 weeks, what are the songs that I can put on this tape? And I can only put 12 songs. So what are the songs I would put on this tape? And then that started turning into a story. So in each of these issues, I don't know, like when you showed that double page spread earlier, if you look at the so on the print version, when the issue actually comes out, on that record will be the name of a band and a song.
Oh, cool.
And so you're supposed to find that song by that band and play it when you're reading the rest of the page.
Cool. So it gets much more immersive if you do that.
Yes. And so I think that's kind of the aim of this book, is to get people to interact with the story that they're reading, find songs. some of these songs might be familiar to you, and then some of them might be songs that you haven't heard of, but I think are worthy of putting on a cassette that I would be taking with me to the end of the world. So
That's wow. That's actually a very good exercise for everybody to do, to think about music that way. That makes it much more. Yeah, I haven't thought of it in that way. That's really cool. And do we get to know more about what happened in the world in the comic or not? Because these creatures, these creatures come from somewhere. There's actually a disease or something, because we see two friends trying to get to safe grounds, and one of them is infected or has a infection on her foot. She's just injured
and she can't walk, but they have to get to the city before sundown because the creatures come out at dark. And so she's like, look, I can't walk, and if we try to do this, both of us are going to be caught in the dark outside, so you run ahead. And then she says, okay, I'll come back, I'll get help, but no spoilers. We'll see how that turns out.
It's actually the if I have to put a feeling on the comic, it isn't because we see the creatures in a few glances, and it doesn't feel, well, it's not horror. It's actually it's a good feeling that you have when you read the comic, mainly because of the music. I'm also going to try to explain this without spoiling too much, but it gives you a good feeling at the end of the comic, and at the same time it gets interesting to know what will happen in the next one. So that's really cool.
And that's kind of my aim, is to show that yes, things are going very badly for the world, but because of music, oddly, we still find hope.
It gets oddly bearable that we can survive. That's a good way of thinking. We also have a short story in the Silver Coin coming out for you.
And that was Michael. I had wanted to collaborate with Michael Walsh, who's the artist on all of the issues, for a very long time. Michael and I have known each other for a few years. I met him at one of the conventions. And he reached out and he said, hey, do you want to do a story for this? And I like the brief, which was the story had to do with the coin, but beyond that, it could be anything. And as soon as he said coin, for whatever reason, my head went to a casino.
It hasn't been done before this issue, and so that's a good find.
And then once it went to casinos, I thought about gambling and lives and the sacrifices people make sometimes for the chance to win. And then I tried to find horror in that, and then oddly that crossed over with Aztec mythology and whatnot. So I won't give away too much, but I'm really proud of the issue. I think it's a really good issue. So
the whole series, the whole anthology series is really cool, and it's really cool that to have your name in between all of them. That makes
absolutely. I mean, I think this arc has Vida Ayala, Josh Williamson, and Matt Rosenberg, and like that's great company to be in. So
absolutely, very cool. Is that your favorite genre to do, horror? Because sometimes I like Blue and Green has horror in it. The Savage Shores, that's a horror comic. Is that your favorite genre?
I don't think The Savage Shores is a horror comic. I think The Savage Shores is
about creatures. I'm not going to spoil too much, but
I think it's alt history, dark fantasy. I wouldn't call Lord of the Rings horror. It's dark fantasy.
True.
So
true.
Yeah.
In the same sense, like for instance, Venom. Sometimes it could be horror, but sometimes it isn't. The same thing with let's say vampires. It doesn't have to be per se horror because there are vampires in it.
I think it can be like gothic romance and still have vampires in it.
That's very true. But the Swamp Thing, that's horror.
Is very much horror.
There you go.
I mean, I don't know that I want to limit myself to that genre, but what happens is sometimes you write something and then it becomes successful. Like I wrote The Savage Shores and it became a hit, and people wanted me to do more stuff like that. And I said, okay, cool. And then I wrote Blue and Green and that became a hit. and people say, oh, I want you to do more horror stuff like that. So there's always been this tendency to kind of push me towards things I've already done.
Yeah.
But that just means, next time I come out with a creator-owned book, like Layla Starr came out, that's not horror at all.
No.
And so there's, I feel like I'm not really sort of penned in by a genre. I just like good stories, regardless of where they come in.
Yeah, that's what I would also want if I had the talent. Is this something you always wanted to do? Did you study for becoming a comic book artist or not?
Yes, it's something I always wanted to do. I actually studied to be a chemical engineer when I was younger.
Okay.
And then I worked as a chemical engineer for a few years. And then I quit and I said, look, I'm just going to write. And I started writing somewhere around 2013. I wrote a few short stories. They got published in a few places. And then a friend of mine who I really respect came up and said, look, you studied for 7 years to do chemical engineering, which you didn't want to do. So why don't you study for a few years to do writing, which you actually do want to do? And I said, okay, that's very good advice. So I moved to the UK to study creative writing. I did that for 2 years. And it was, I think 2014 and 2015 I was studying. And then in 2015, I finished Black Mamba, which is the first book that I put out. Yeah.
And have you always been a comic book fan during those days?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, I read a lot of comic books, but not Marvel DC stuff. It was mostly Phantom, Mandrake, Flash Gordon.
I
don't know what publisher they were under here, but in India they were published under Indrajal Comics.
Here it is under, I think Titan does some stuff, but I'm not quite sure. I'm looking at a Phantom comic right now, but I can't see what is on the back, which publisher it is. But like the classic era.
And Phantom was like my favorite character of the lot as well. So I read a lot of that. I read a lot of Tintin. I read a lot of Asterix.
All right.
So more of that stuff, less of the Marvel DC stuff. And then when I was late teens, I discovered manga and anime, and that had a massive influence as well. And then when I was 20, a friend of mine gave me the first volume of Sandman. And that was the thing that I read that really kind of blew my mind. And I was like, oh man, I want to do this. And then pretty much after that, I read everything Neil Gaiman had done. And then I read in an article that Alan Moore had recommended Neil Gaiman to Karen Berger. So I was like, all right, let's find out who Alan Moore is. And I read everything Alan Moore had done.
Yeah.
Then, Morrison, Ellis, Ennis, all of those guys. So pretty much it was that late 80s, early 90s Vertigo writing group that really influenced me and sort of made me want to write comics.
That's a good fundament to start on.
Excellent writing,
Yeah, and by not looking at the commercial Marvel and DC at that time, I mean,
I was really not into any of the superhero stuff until I read something like Watchmen, and that was my gateway into superheroes. I read something like Sandman, where Martian Manhunter shows up for an issue, and then Batman Constantine show up for an issue. So it was Vertigo that acted as this window for me to read superheroes. And then even now, I would say I'm possibly more influenced by the Vertigo version of those heroes. And my approach to writing them is massively influenced by that, rather than like the very actiony ongoing. I don't write people punching each other very much.
No, and that's a good thing. You should always keep the story in mind. That's much more.
You have to care about, like, there's a
Yeah.
reason why these characters are fascinating, and
Yeah.
we should dig into that rather than they're not fascinating because they're always fighting someone else,
No, and it should hurt you as a reader if there is a punch to be made. It should hurt you as a reader that your favorite character is getting a punch. Now, these superheroes are getting punched that much that you really don't care anymore because they don't get enough depth as story wise. So that's
I mean, I think that's key. Like the word you said, like care.
Yeah.
Like the first question I always ask myself is, why would people care about this story?
Mm-hmm.
And if I can tell a story that can make people care, then I can have punching, I can have not punching, I can have science fiction, I can have horror, I can have anything. As long as people care, it will be a good story.
And to make the circle then round again, and I'm going to show this promotional clip of Venom while I'm asking you this. Does that make it easier for you and to write about a character as Dylan, because you can start with this? He's a teenager who suddenly gets. We've read it in the last issues from King in Black and such, that he's suddenly getting this. Yeah, he has to work with this responsibility that he has towards having this symbiote on him or working together with that thing.
Yeah, and I think it's the way I pitched it, I think it's a really interesting story for me to take on, and character for me to take on, because what we do very early on, I don't want to spoil it, is we put Dylan in a situation where he's alone and he has to figure out how to be Venom, if you will. But also he's alone because his father is gone. Except his father is still present in Venom's memories. So Venom is the only one who still carries his father with him, if you will. And that makes a very complicated relationship. And I thought that was super interesting to explore, especially for a kid who's like a teenager and things are changing with his body, with his life, with his hormones. He's going to be angry. He's going to be sad. To put that alongside a relationship where he's afraid of the thing, but he also knows he needs the symbiote, but he also knows that his father is somewhere inside that symbiote. That's very potent, and I think that's a great premise to explore.
To a certain point, as you explained it, it sounded very Peter Parker-y, and then that's the twist. He has this sort of example, or his father, which he has to live up to, but who can also control him or can keep tabs on him. So that makes it a huge 2021 twist on the whole Peter Parker stuff. So that's a cool chance to do your thing.
And I mean, I think that reflection has to exist because Venom as a character in origin is a reflection of Peter Parker in some way. So I think that's an interesting angle to explore, and hopefully I can do that with the run.
All right. Do you still? This is always a typical question, but do you have other characters in and it doesn't have to be per se a superhero or such, that you want to do something with? Did you always envision you would be working on somebody like Swamp Thing, or are there other?
No, I mean, very early on when I got into comics, a friend asked me that what would be your aim? What would be your sort of hallmark of success? And I said, oh man, I just want to write Hellblazer. And that month they canceled Hellblazer. So I realized that there's less to be gained from sort of hanging your ideas on character, rather than I would much rather be asked like, okay, what do you want to write? And then go to DC or Marvel and say, I have a good story that I think works with this character. So I don't really think about what characters I would like to write. I tend to come up with concepts and ideas first, and then go like, okay, this concept works for this character, so I would like to write this character. That's kind of been my approach so far, and I'm not going to give you specifics because there are already because some of these ideas have already been pitched to Marvel. So.
And of course, so for characters like Hellblazer and such, you're doing Justice League Dark also. So that helps. Is there a
and that was completely incidental. Like I started doing Justice League Dark because James Tynan, who was on the book at the time, he read These Savage Shores and he was like, hey, I'm going to be stepping off this book because I'm going to be doing Batman. We're looking for someone to take over the book, and I think what you've done in something like These Savage Shores is really good. So would you like to come on board? And so that was completely incidental, but yes, those are all the characters that I was like, yes, I really enjoy writing these characters.
Yeah, I suddenly thought about it when you said like, yeah, Hellblazer, that was a really cool character and he got cancelled. But I'm like, he's doing Justice League Dark, so he's got his stuff there. Yeah. And one more title that really sticks out is Catwoman.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in that?
Well, Jamie Rich, who gave me my first shot at a DC story, who's the editor, was at the time the Batman group editor. And he said, hey, do you want to do a couple of Catwoman fill-in issues? Because I think Joelle Jones was doing the run at that point. And I said, yeah, no problem. You know, I'll come in and do it. And I had never written the character before. So I was like, okay, let me go read some Catwoman. And then I found the Darwin Cook, Ed Brubaker run. I found the Tim Sale, When in Rome. And so, so those were, I read those and I was like, okay, cool. I can definitely do a slick Hollywood crime drama version of Catwoman. And so, yeah, that was my touchstone for that series, if you will. The only piece of advice I'd gotten early on was that it said, you know, try to involve other sort of superhero characters in the book, because that's something, if you notice the Brubaker Cook run, or if you notice the Tim Sale book, they don't really have a lot of the other Gotham superheroes. It's kind of more grounded, more focused on Selina. And so that's an interesting challenge, to take like American pulp crime storytelling, but have like Clayface and Poison Ivy and whatnot in it. So that was kind of the way I got into those books. Once I had written the fill-in issues, you know, editorial changeover happened, and Jessica Chen was the editor who took over Catwoman, and she said, hey, you know, in the previous run, we really liked your fill-in issues. Would you like to take on the book awesome. when Joel steps up? So,
all right. One thing I've also noticed, but those are mainly your own comics. You always bring in Indian artists also. Is that a coincidence, or is it always people you know from somewhere, or?
No, I mean, I think India has had a long history with comics, and there's a very good creative talent pool in India. And frankly, the reason, you know, people, I don't know if you've seen Sumit Kumar's art on These Savage Shores and then on Justice League Dark, but that guy is, I think he is 28, and he is out of this world. Like, by the time he is my age, he's going to be a master. And it would always kind of disturb me that the only reason he's not doing, or he wasn't doing stuff at DC or Marvel or Image or anything of that sort, is because he didn't have the access to talk to the editors, to show his work. And so, yeah, it has been a concerted effort on my part to go like, look, these people exist and their work is amazing, and the world should see it and recognize it. And I'm super glad to say that, you know, Sumit worked with me on These Savage Shores. You know, he's done a few DC stories now. Anand worked with me on Blue and Green and Graffiti's Wall, and he's doing a couple of DC things. I'm working on a couple of other creator-run projects as well, and all the artists that I've worked with are kind of being discovered by other publishers as well, which is always nice to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially the last few years, I think last decade, the world is getting much smaller, and especially for the comic book industry, artists don't always have to go to the States or to get their work seen. Now, thanks to digital media and such, it gets so, it's the same for you, communicating with an Al Ewing or with a Brian Hitch over there. Yeah, it gets done the same way as we're talking right now. So
I mean, interestingly, both Al and Brian are based in the UK.
Ah, really? I have no idea. I have no idea where everybody lives. But okay, that makes it more handy. But in these times, face-to-face isn't really that easy.
No, I agree.
But yeah, thankfully for social media, we also had the chance to talk to you. And thanks a lot. I've learned a lot, and it's always a pleasure to see new work from you. I have this. I'll show you a bit. We have this thing in the comic book. These are the single issues, and in the middle, all those comics are like my personal suggestions to
cool,
to customers. And Savage Shores is between those. Graffiti's Wall is in there. Paradiso. And probably, Radio Apocalypse also. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was an honor, absolutely. Thankfully, my nerves are still around, but it was really fun.
The pleasure is all mine.
All right. And everybody, thank you for listening and watching, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much, Ram.
Thank you. Bye.
Mekanicast is de podcast van Mechanic Strip. Te bekijken op YouTube en te beluisteren op Spotify, iTunes en Soundcloud. Vormgeving en techniek door Developing Productions.